The beeping monitor beside Ava's bed suddenly flatlined, and so did my heart. My 5-year-old daughter lay limp beneath a tangle of wires, lips gray, her tiny chest barely rising. I was still screaming for help when a hand touched my arm. "You need to meet the boy who just came in," the social worker whispered. I should have stayed, but something in her voice pulled me. I stumbled down the hallway, my ears ringing, until I saw him, a teenage boy, soaked in rain, dirt smudging his face, and hazel eyes, my mother's eyes, Ava's eyes, and just as my knees buckled under the weight of recognition, the second betrayal struck. My aunt's voice crackled cold through the phone. "So, you found him. Good luck saving your daughter," after I flagged his donor file. She'd hidden him for years, and now she was letting Ava die. But as the hospital walls closed in and hope bled out with every beep, I realized something else. They tried to bury a truth that could save her, but they never thought it would walk through the door. The scent of antiseptic, the sharp wail of monitors, and the ghost of Ava's giggle clung to the room. I stared at the boy with my family's eyes, shaking, unraveling, knowing deep down, this betrayal wasn't the last. If you've ever stood powerless watching someone you love slip away, don't scroll. Just hit like, and if you feel that ache rising in your throat, leave me a comment saying, "I understand." Funny how a stranger's face can hold the secret to saving the only person you can't live without. 3 days earlier, the air in Seattle always carries a kind of heaviness after rain, but that morning it felt like the sky itself was mourning with me. The fog clung low, wrapping the evergreen trees in a shroud of silence, and every breath I took was damp, chilled, heavy. My shoes pressed into the grass, slick and dark with dew, and for a long moment I couldn't move. My hand hovered just above the cold stone wall, lined with names and dates, etched memories that no one ever asked for. I let my fingers brush over 2 plaques, Sophia Thompson, my mother, and Ava Carter, my little girl. Just seeing their names carved into the stone felt unreal, like someone else's nightmare I'd been dropped into. The letters were sharp beneath my fingertips, but what cut deeper was the weight behind them, everything those names meant, everything I'd lost. Beside me, Jordan shifted his small frame, clutching a stuffed bear so worn its seams barely held together. Its fur was faded, one eye missing, and yet in his hands it looked sacred, like an offering. He bent down slowly, gently placing it beneath Ava's plaque. For a second I couldn't breathe. That bear had once been clutched in her tiny hands, dragged across hospital floors, tucked under her chin at night, and now it lay against stone, damp with mist. Jordan looked up at me then. 13 years old, his hazel eyes carried a weight no child should ever have to carry. They weren't just his eyes, they were echoes of my mother's, and of Ava's too. When he blinked, I saw them both in him, like ghosts staring through his gaze. He whispered so softly I almost thought I imagined it. "For you, Ava. Always." His voice cracked, and in that instant the silence around us seemed to shatter. A crow cawed somewhere high in the trees, a sound too sharp, too alive against the thick fog. My throat tightened, and I felt my own voice tremble before I even spoke. How did we get here? I thought, but the words never left my mouth. Instead, they circled inside me, clawing at my chest. How had life taken me from nights of fairy lights and bedtime stories to this, standing in a cemetery park, watching a boy who should have been a stranger mourn the same people I'd lost? I let my palm rest fully against the stone now, cold, seeping into my skin. I closed my eyes, trying to remember their warmth. My mother's hand holding mine as a child, Ava's laughter bubbling through our apartment. I could almost hear it, but the memory came laced with something darker. My mother's last words, whispered and broken, still haunted me. "There's something you need to know. A secret that had unraveled everything." I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, but the mist seemed to curl tighter around us, as if it wanted to keep the truth buried. I wanted to ask Ava, if they knew the cost of the truths I had uncovered. Did they see what it had done to me? Did they see what it had turned me into? Jordan reached for my hand then, his small fingers brushing against mine. The warmth startled me. He didn't say anything more, but he didn't have to. His grip was heavy with shared grief, a silent pact that neither of us wanted, but both of us needed. I looked down at him, at this boy who should have been nothing more than a name in someone else's file, but who had become my last tether to the people I loved. His hazel eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment we didn't need words. We were both broken, both betrayed by the same secrets. The rain had left streaks down the plaques, glistening like tears carved into stone. The fog swirled between the trees, twisting like it carried whispers from another world. Secrets, lies, promises made and broken. My chest ached with the memory of every step that had led us here, every hand that had pushed us closer to this edge. I wanted to scream, to demand why it had to be us, why the people who were supposed to protect me, to protect Ava, had instead chosen silence, jealousy, betrayal. I wanted to claw at the earth until it gave me answers, but instead I stood there frozen, letting the cold seep in. "Do you think they know?" I whispered, my voice barely carrying. "Do you think they see what happened?" Jordan's grip tightened just slightly, his silence heavier than words. The stuffed bear slumped against the wall, its fur already damp with dew, its stitched smile almost mocking. I stared at it until the world blurred, my vision swimming with tears I refused to let fall. That bear had seen more of Ava's laughter, her dreams, her innocence than anyone else ever would again. And now it was just a relic, left in a park where secrets slept. The mist thickened around us, curling like it wanted to hide us too, to swallow us into the same silence that had already claimed so much. I pulled my hand back from the plaque, flexing my fingers as if I could shake off the chill, but it clung to me. The cold wasn't from the stone. It was from the truth, from the betrayals I carried. I glanced at Jordan once more. His shoulders hunched, but his chin was set, stubborn. He was just a boy, but in that moment, he looked older, carved by pain. The kind of pain that doesn't just scar, it defines. And that was when I knew. This wasn't just a story of grief. It wasn't just about loss. It was about what had been done to us, deliberately, cruelly. Secrets had broken my world, torn my family apart, and left me standing in this fog. But those same secrets had also brought me to Jordan. The boy placed here by lies, yet the only one who understood. As I turned my eyes back to the plaques, the silence of the park pressed in again, heavier now, insistent. Somewhere beneath the damp grass and curling mist, the truth still waited. A truth I had paid for with everything I loved. And this was only the beginning. The fundraiser buzzed with voices, laughter, and the clinking of glasses against plastic cups. Bright banners stretched across the walls. Kids darted between tables stacked with auction baskets, and the air smelled faintly of coffee, cinnamon rolls, and too many folding chairs packed into one hall. I stood by the registration table with a clipboard pressed to my chest, reminding myself to smile at every new face that walked through the doors. I was fresh out of college, a brand new teacher still wearing the nervous shine of someone who hadn't yet figured out how to carry authority. That's when I noticed him. Across the crowded room, a man leaned casually against the refreshments table, his laugh cutting through the noise. It wasn't just the sound, it was the warmth in it, the way it rolled and drew people closer. He caught me watching, and instead of glancing away, he grinned. Not a polite smile, not the kind you give out of obligation. It was genuine, like he already knew something about me I hadn't yet told anyone. I felt my cheeks flush. I told myself it was just the heat of the crowded hall, but the truth was, my heart gave itself away before my mind could catch up. We met officially an hour later, when he approached the silent auction table where I was straightening bid sheets. "You don't look like you belong behind that desk," he said, voice playful. "And what does that mean?" I raised a brow, trying not to sound defensive. He shrugged, sipping his coffee. "You look like someone who should be out there laughing, not tallying up gift basket bids." I didn't know how to answer, so I just laughed, awkward, quick. It had been a long time since a stranger's words melted my guard like that. His name was Ethan Carter. He was volunteering too, but unlike me, he seemed comfortable, like he'd been part of events like this his whole life. His confidence wasn't arrogant, it was magnetic. He asked me questions, simple ones about teaching and why I'd chosen the foster care system to support. And before I realized it, I was telling him about my students. the small victories that made the long days worth it. That night, after we finished cleaning up, he walked me out to the parking lot. Seattle's mist had settled in, wrapping the streetlights in halos. "Hungry?" he asked, eyes twinkling. Minutes later, I found myself at a neon-lit taco truck, the kind that stayed open past midnight for people chasing warmth and grease. The air smelled of cilantro and grilled meat, and steam rose in thick clouds from the grill. We ate standing under the awning, our paper plates balanced on the edge of the counter, laughing about who dripped salsa faster. Something about the scene, neon lights buzzing, rain slicking the pavement, his laugh still rolling, felt like a doorway had opened. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the shadows of my past. I wasn't thinking about my fractured childhood, the silence in my mother's eyes, or the secrets that always hung in the corners of our house. For the first time, I let myself feel light. He walked me to my car, and before I could fumble for my keys, he said, "You're going to be an amazing mom one day, Riley." The words stopped me cold. No one had ever said that to me, not once. For a heartbeat, I couldn't respond. Then I whispered, "You really think so?" His smile didn't falter. "I don't just think, I know." That night replayed in my mind for weeks. We started seeing each other more, coffee between classes, late-night walks along the Puget Sound. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks mixed with our conversations about dreams, about who we wanted to become. The salty air whipped against my hair, but his hand in mine kept me grounded. He listened when I spoke, really listened, and when silence fell, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was easy. It was safe. Months blurred into seasons. One evening we walked in a park strung with fairy lights, the kind that looked like fireflies caught in branches. The air smelled of wet leaves and the hum of the city faded to nothing. Ethan stopped, tugging gently on my hand. "Riley," he said, voice quieter than I'd ever heard it, "I don't want to imagine a life without you in it." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that shimmered under the soft lights. My breath caught, the world narrowing to just us, his eyes locked on mine. "Yes," I whispered before he even asked. "Yes." Our wedding was simple, just us, close friends, and the Puget Sound as our witness. Fairy lights again, twinkling against the water, and the faint crash of waves as we exchanged vows. No grand hall, no show, just a promise, whispered with tears in our eyes, that this was forever. That day, standing with Ethan under those lights, I believed it. I believed I'd finally escaped the darkness of my childhood, that love could rewrite the story I had been born into. Looking back now, it almost feels cruel how much hope I carried, how certain I was that I'd outrun the shadows. But in that moment, with his hand wrapped around mine and laughter weaving through the night, it felt like the world was finally giving me permission to dream. His smile made me believe I could outrun the past, and for a while, I did. The first time I held Ava in my arms, the hospital lights seemed to blur into a soft glow, like even the sterile white walls wanted to make space for her. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine with a strength that startled me, and when she opened her eyes, hazel, deep and familiar, I gasped. They weren't just her eyes. They were my mother's eyes, Sophia's, reflecting back at me as if some piece of her had been reborn. I whispered her name, Ava Carter, and my heart felt like it might split open from the weight of love I had never known I could carry. Ethan leaned over my shoulder, his hand resting gently on my back. "She looks just like you," he whispered, though we both knew her gaze mirrored someone else. I didn't correct him. I just kissed Ava's forehead, letting her warm breath tickle my skin, and promised myself I would protect this fragile miracle with everything I had. The weeks that followed blurred into a kind of joy I had only imagined. Our Seattle apartment, once quiet and filled with the faint hum of the city outside, became alive with her laughter, her cries, the rustling of blankets and lullabies that Ethan sang softly when he thought I was asleep. We strung up fairy lights across the living room ceiling, their glow turning nighttime feedings into something magical rather than exhausting. There was a rhythm to it all, the squeak of the rocking chair, the soft hum of the dishwasher in the background, the way Ava's giggles filled every corner as she grew. At the end of each day, I'd collapse onto the couch, sharing stories from my classroom with Ethan while Ava babbled on the floor with her toys. He'd laugh at my impressions of the kids' antics, the way one boy insisted the moon was a balloon, or how a girl tried to smuggle a frog in her backpack. And every time Ethan laughed, I felt that same warmth from the fundraiser years ago, like the world was finally right. But even in the brightest rooms, shadows find their way in. Mom started visiting more often after Ava was born. At first, it comforted me, seeing Sophia cradle Ava, humming softly, her weathered hands stroking her granddaughter's cheek. It felt like a bridge between past and future. But soon, I began to notice something different. She would hold Ava close, then drift into silence, her gaze fixed on some point far away, as if she were seeing something that wasn't there. Sometimes, she'd press her lips together like she wanted to speak, but swallowed the words instead. One evening, while Ava lay curled against me, her breath steady in sleep, Mom sat in the chair by the window. The glow of the string lights cast her face in half shadow. She sighed deeply, fingers twisting the edge of her sweater. "Some truths stay locked for a reason, Riley," she murmured, almost to herself. I frowned. "What do you mean?" She shook her head, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing, just enjoy her. That's what matters." But I couldn't let it go. Her words lingered like smoke, filling the air long after she left. Locked truths. What truths? Why did her eyes glisten like she carried a weight too heavy to set down? The next time she came, I noticed her hand drift to her bag, like she was checking for something. Later, when she thought I wasn't looking, she touched the small pendant around her neck, her fingers trembling. I knew that look. It was the same one she had when she thought about the past, the parts of our childhood she never explained. That night, lying awake with Ava's small body curled against me, I thought about her words. My mother's silence felt like a wall I couldn't climb, and it scared me. What was on the other side of it? And why was she so determined to keep it hidden? I tried to dismiss it. Life was good. I had Ethan, who kissed my forehead every morning before work. I had Ava, whose laughter turned even the darkest days into something bright. Maybe I was imagining the tension, twisting her vague words into something bigger than they were. But deep down, I knew better. One Sunday afternoon, as rain tapped gently against the window, Mom sat with Ava nestled in her lap. She leaned down, whispering words I couldn't quite hear. When I asked, she simply smiled and said, "She's got your strength." But her eyes were clouded, hiding something behind their softness. I wanted to press her, to demand answers, but fear held me back. What if I wasn't ready to know? What if the truth she hinted at could break the fragile happiness I had built? Still, late at night, when the city was quiet and Ethan's breathing had gone steady beside me, I found myself staring at the ceiling, hearing her words over and over again. Some truths stay locked for a reason. The apartment glowed with warmth, string lights twinkling, Ava's soft snores filling the room. Yet beneath it all, unease crept in. My mother's silences were louder than words. Her cryptic mentions of things better left locked gnawed at the edges of my peace, and as much as I tried to push it away, I couldn't shake the question, what was my mother hiding? It began with the bruises, faint at first, scattered like shadows across her skin. I noticed them one evening when she rolled up her sleeve to wash the dishes at my apartment. The light above the sink flickered, catching on purple blotches that made my stomach twist. "Mom," I said, my voice trying to sound casual but failing. "What happened to your arm?" She barely looked down. "Just clumsy. Hit the counter, I think." She smiled, the stubborn, dismissive kind of smile I knew too well. But as she turned away, I caught the way her hand trembled around the sponge. The headaches followed, sharp and merciless. She would rub her temples while Ava squealed with laughter, covering her eyes as though the brightness of life itself was too much. One night I watched her flinch when Ava's toy clattered against the hardwood floor. The sound wasn't that loud, but she winced as though a hammer had struck her skull. That was the moment I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Mom, we need to see a doctor," I said, sharper this time, almost pleading. She waved me off, her voice tired but determined. "It's nothing, Riley. Just age catching up. Don't make a fuss." But I saw her eyes, the dimness behind them. the way she clutched her sweater at her chest, as if she was holding herself together by sheer force. And deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The hospital became our second home. The sterile smell of disinfectant mixed with burnt coffee lingered in every hallway. Machines beeped steadily, nurses' shoes squeaked against linoleum, and the fluorescent lights hummed relentlessly, making everything feel colder, harsher. I balanced two worlds, standing before my students by day, plastering on a smile, then rushing to the hospital each night. I graded essays in the waiting room, the words blurring together as I strained to hear any change in her breathing down the hall. Time stretched thin, every second bending under the weight of waiting. Ava was only too young to understand, but old enough to notice. She clung to me tightly, her wide hazel eyes mirroring Sophia's. "Why does Grandma look sleepy all the time?" she asked once, her little fingers tugging at my sleeve. I had no answer that wouldn't shatter her world. Instead, I pulled her into my lap, whispering, "Grandma's just tired, baby. She needs us to be strong." But how do you explain leukemia to a child? The doctor said the word like it was just another diagnosis, another chart to manage. Leukemia. 3 syllables that slammed into me like a wave, leaving me gasping. They talked about treatments, chemotherapy, survival rates, but all I heard was the ticking of a clock, the inevitable countdown we couldn't stop. Night after night, I sat by her bedside. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on her face, making her skin look thinner, almost translucent. Her once strong hands, the ones that had braided my hair and held me through storms, were now fragile, veins rising like fragile rivers beneath her skin. I held them, rubbing warmth into them, desperate to tether her here. Sometimes Ava toddled into the room, clutching her stuffed bear, climbing onto the chair beside me. She would reach for Sophia's hand with her tiny fingers. "Grandma, wake up," she'd whisper, her voice so full of innocence it broke me into pieces. I turned away so she wouldn't see my tears. One morning, fog rolled thick across Seattle, pressing itself against the hospital windows, blurring the city into nothing but gray. I leaned against the glass, my forehead cold against it, searching for clarity in the mist. Behind me, I heard her breath falter, a shallow rattle that froze my blood. When I turned, she was looking at me. Her eyes, though dulled by pain, burned with urgency. She motioned weakly for me to come closer. My heart pounded as I hurried to her side, gripping her hand. It was ice against my palm. Her voice was a whisper, ragged but determined. "Stay strong for Ava," she breathed. A pause stretched heavy, and then she added, "But there's something you need to know." My pulse roared in my ears. "What, Mom? Tell me," I urged, leaning closer, desperate. Her lips trembled, words forming, but never fully coming. Her breath caught. Her eyes fluttered closed. "Mom?" My voice cracked. "Please, Mom, tell me." But the silence answered for her. Her hand, cold in mine, slipped into stillness, and in that moment I felt a void open in me, a hollow space no warmth could ever fill. She left me with love, yes, but also with unfinished words, a truth I was never given. The days that followed blurred together like one long shadow. I carried Ava on my hip while arranging flowers, signing papers, nodding at condolences I barely heard. Friends and family filled the apartment, but I felt alone, wrapped in a fog that seeped through the windows and refused to lift. At night, Ava asked the question that stabbed deeper than any silence. "Where's Grandma?" she whispered in her tiny bedroom, clutching her bear. I gathered her into my arms, pressing my face into her soft hair. "She's resting, baby," I murmured, my voice breaking. "She's just resting." Lies, sweet lies, because how could I tell her the truth? But even as grief crushed me, something else gnawed at the edges of my heart. What had my mother meant? What truth had she carried to her grave? Why had she left me with half a sentence, an unfinished warning that now haunted me more than her absence? Her silence wasn't just loss, it was mystery. Lying in bed with Ava's soft breathing beside me, I saw it replay again and again, her lips moving, her voice whispering about something I needed to know. I remembered the bruises before the diagnosis, the way she clutched her pendant during visits, the distant look in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Her death had taken her body, but her secret still lived, echoing louder than my grief. One night, I pressed my hand against the cold apartment window. The fog outside swallowed the city, thick enough to hide everything. "What did you want me to know, Mom?" I whispered into the silence. No answer came. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, and the weight of unfinished truth pressing down. Her cold hand had left me with more than grief. It had left me with a void, and inside that void, a secret waiting to be uncovered. The first Sunday dinner after Mom's death carried a weight that felt impossible to name. The dining room was dim, the chandelier's light throwing long shadows across the wallpaper, making everyone's faces look sharper, harder. The smell of roast chicken and buttered rolls lingered in the air, but the food sat mostly untouched, cooling on the plates. Forks tapped occasionally, not from hunger, but from the nervousness of having something in our hands, anything to fill the silence. I looked around the table, my Aunt Margaret at the head, her husband Henry beside her, cousins scattered along the sides. Their faces were tired, drawn, and yet something else lay beneath the grief, something unspoken. The air buzzed with it, like static before a storm. Mom's last words still clawed at me. "Stay strong for Ava, but there's something you need to know." I couldn't let them go. I cleared my throat, my fingers knotting the napkin in my lap. "Mom tried to tell me something before she passed," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "She said there was something I needed to know, about our family." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples of discomfort moved around the table. One cousin pushed food around his plate without eating. Henry coughed into his fist, his eyes fixed on his glass of wine. Margaret froze for only a second before setting her own glass down with a sharp clink. "Riley," she said, her tone firm, almost cutting, "this isn't the time. Your mother's gone. Let her rest. Don't go digging up shadows." Her words stung, but I pressed on. "It wasn't just nonsense. She wanted me to know something. Don't you think I deserve to understand what she meant?" Margaret's lips tightened, her smile thin and brittle. "The dying say a lot of things. You shouldn't twist her words into something they're not." I searched their faces, desperate for someone, anyone, to back me up, to acknowledge the unease I had seen in Mom's eyes, the cryptic silences, the way she'd clutched that pendant like it was protecting her. But no one spoke. All I saw were lowered gazes, clenched jaws, and a silence that screamed complicity. Anger burned hot in my chest. "She said it was something I needed to know." I pushed. "Why would she say that unless there was more? Unless there was something all of you are keeping from me?" The words cracked the stillness, and for a moment it felt like the room itself shifted. Margaret's hand came down hard against the table, the smack so sharp it made Ava jump in her booster seat beside me. My daughter whimpered, clutching her stuffed bear, and I pulled her close, rubbing her back, my fury rising with every breath. "Enough," Margaret snapped. "Your mother carried her burdens. Now let her rest. If you stir this up, you'll only tear this family apart." "Tear it apart?" I shot back, my voice shaking with emotion. "It already feels broken. Don't you see that?" The silence that followed was thicker than before, heavier. My uncle's voice broke it, low and muttered, but heavy with warning. "Some things are better left alone." The words struck me like ice water, but it was Margaret who delivered the final blow. Her eyes locked onto mine, cold and unblinking. Her voice was quieter now, almost a hiss, but every word carried weight. "Drop it, Riley, or you'll regret touching that vault." Vault. The word rattled in my chest, unfamiliar and heavy, like a door slamming shut. My breath caught. "What vault?" I whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Margaret leaned back in her chair, folding her arms, her smile a tight, cruel line. "You don't want to know. Believe me." No one corrected her. No one denied it. Their silence was its own confirmation. My pulse thundered in my ears. There was a vault, and they didn't want me anywhere near it. Whatever was inside, it was the reason behind the unfinished words my mother had left me with. I looked at each of them one by one, searching for cracks in their armor. But all I saw were cold stares, eyes hard and unyielding. Their silence felt like betrayal, the very kind Mom had warned me about. Dinner ended in fragments, people rising quickly, muttering excuses, scraping chairs back against the hardwood. Plates were left half full, Wine glasses smudged and forgotten. The tension clung to the room even as bodies left it, a suffocating fog that refused to lift. When I finally gathered Ava in my arms and left, Margaret's warning echoed in my skull. Drop it or you'll regret touching that vault. Back in my apartment, the quiet was deafening. Ava slept in her tiny bedroom, clutching her bear, her soft breath steady in the dark. I sat on the living room floor surrounded by boxes of Mom's things, the cardboard smelling faintly of dust and time. I pulled out yellowed photographs, edges curled from years of handling. Letters tied with brittle ribbon, recipe cards stained with sauce, little fragments of a life I thought I knew. I searched through them with trembling hands, hoping for any clue, any mention of the vault Margaret had spat out like a threat. Nothing obvious, no key, no directions, just fragments. The longer I searched, the angrier I became. Their silence at dinner hadn't been grief. It had been fear. Fear of me digging too deep. Fear of what I might find. And fear meant there was something worth hiding. I sat back against the wall, the papers spread out around me, my fingers pressed hard against the clutter. My voice broke the quiet, a whisper to the empty room. "What were you trying to tell me, Mom? What's in that vault?" The refrigerator hummed. The wind rustled against the window, but nothing answered. Still, the silence didn't scare me anymore. It ignited me. If my family thought I would back down, they didn't know me at all. Mom's unfinished words weren't a warning to stay away. They were a call to fight, to uncover the truth, no matter how much they wanted it buried. I would dig, alone, if I had to, because whatever secrets they were guarding behind that vault, they were mine to uncover, and I wouldn't stop until I did. The Seattle Adoption Agency was quieter than I expected, almost oppressively so. A faint hum from the fluorescent lights filled the room, blending with the smell of stale coffee and old paper. Dust floated in the beams of harsh white light, and the squeak of my chair echoed each time I shifted. The desk in front of me was cluttered with folders stacked high, corners bent, some labeled neatly, others marked with hurried scrawls. My hands were damp, fingers leaving faint smudges on the worn manila covers as I turned page after page. I told myself I didn't even know what I was looking for, but deep down, I knew exactly what I hoped to find. Some shred of proof that Mom's unfinished words weren't just a dying woman's ramblings. There's something you need to know. The names blurred together, case after case of children shuffled from foster homes to group facilities, their lives summarized in bureaucratic shorthand. I almost closed the last folder when my eyes froze on a single name, printed in block letters: Jordan Reed. The file was thin, almost too thin, but the details hit me like a blow. Male, born in Seattle. Mother listed as Sophia Thompson, my mother. Foster care placement scrawled across the pages like a trail of abandonment. And then, in handwriting darker than the rest, a note. Runaway, age 13. My throat tightened. My breath caught. The room seemed to tilt slightly as if the ground itself had shifted beneath me. A half-brother. Flesh and blood I never knew existed. Mom had kept him a secret, hidden him from me, from everyone. I traced the description with a shaking finger. Hazel eyes. My chest constricted. The same eyes that Ava had. The same eyes I used to see in Mom when she smiled. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered into the stale air, my voice breaking. The sound of my phone buzzing against the desk made me jump. The screen lit up with a name that made my stomach drop. Uncle Henry. I hesitated, thumb hovering, before I forced myself to answer. "Hello?" His voice was like steel, sharp and cutting. "Riley, I know what you've been doing." My mouth went dry. "What do you mean?" "You've been digging," he snapped, "into things that don't concern you, into things your mother never wanted disturbed. I'm telling you now, stop." Anger flared despite the fear knotting in my stomach. "She tried to tell me before she died. She wanted me to know. Why are you all working so hard to keep this from me?" There was a pause on the other end. A pause so long I thought he'd hung up. Then quieter, slower. His words cut deeper. "Secrets protect us all, Riley. Stop now, before you regret it." The way he said it sent a shiver down my spine. His voice wasn't just threatening. It was laced with something heavier, almost desperate. Like exposing the truth wouldn't just hurt me, but everyone tied to it. I hung up before he could say anything else, my heart pounding so hard it felt like the only sound in the room. My hands trembled as I shoved Jordan's file back into the folder, my vision blurred by tears I refused to let fall. Jordan was real. Mom had another child, and they were terrified of me knowing. That night, my apartment felt colder than usual. Ava slept soundly in her tiny bedroom, clutching her stuffed bear, her breathing soft and steady. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by boxes of Mom's things, the cardboard sagging at the edges, the scent of dust and age filling the air. The lamp beside me threw a dim yellow glow, barely piercing the shadows stretching across the floor. I pulled one box closer, my hands digging through old photographs, crumpled receipts, and brittle letters. Nothing leapt out. Nothing explained the vault Margaret had hissed about at dinner. Nothing explained Jordan. But then, my fingers brushed something at the very bottom, a folded scrap of paper wedged between tax forms. My pulse quickened as I pulled it free, the edges soft from being handled, the writing faint. It was Mom's handwriting, slanted, urgent, protect the secret. The words burned into me, heavier than stone. I sat frozen, the paper trembling in my hands, the room too quiet. Was she warning me to stay away? Or was this her last plea for me to protect the truth, even if it destroyed the people who had tried to bury it? Uncle Henry's words echoed. Secrets protect us all. But they felt different from hers. His words were about silence, about control. Hers felt like a call, a responsibility. I pressed the note against my chest, closing my eyes. Fear coursed through me, cold and unrelenting. They were watching. They were threatening. But fear was no longer enough to stop me. I thought of Mom's cold hand in mine, her lips trembling with the words she never got to say. I thought of Ava's laughter, her innocence, her hazel eyes that tied her to all of this. And now I thought of Jordan, somewhere out there, alone, a runaway lost to the system. If my family wanted me to stop, it only meant one thing. The secret was real, and it mattered. I opened my eyes, the note still clutched tight, and whispered to the empty room, I won't stop, Mom. I'll protect it. Whatever it is, I'll find it. Fear rose like a shadow, but beneath it resolve burned brighter. The deeper I dug, the more dangerous this became. But the truth was waiting, and I was done letting silence bury it. 3 years slipped by, though sometimes it felt as if I had been suspended in a single long breath since the day Mom died. Seattle had become unbearable. The hospital corridors, the constant echo of Margaret's warning, the discovery of Jordan's name buried in files, it all pressed on me like a weight I could never set down. I needed distance, space to breathe, and when a teaching job in Portland opened up, nestled near the forest and far enough from Seattle's ghosts, I grabbed it like a lifeline. The drive south was quiet. Ava, now 5, hummed in the back seat, her stuffed bear propped against her shoulder as she gazed out at the rolling green hills. Her hazel eyes caught the afternoon light, so much like Mom's, so much like Jordan's in that old description I couldn't shake from my mind. I gripped the wheel tighter, both terrified and comforted by the resemblance. Our new house was small, but it had warmth. Wooden floors creaked with each step, and tall windows let the light pour in, spilling across the empty rooms. Outside, a sea of pines swayed, their scent drifting through the cracks like something ancient and grounding. Ava darted through the rooms as if she'd been waiting her whole life for this fresh canvas. "Mommy, it echoes!" she squealed, her giggle bouncing off the bare walls. She twirled in circles, her bear tucked under her arm, her braids whipping around. I lowered a box to the floor, my arms aching, and leaned against the wall, watching her. For a fleeting moment, my chest loosened. This could be a new beginning. That first weekend, we found the local park. It was tucked against the forest's edge, where swings squeaked in rhythm and children's laughter mingled with the rustle of pine needles. Ava ran ahead, her sneakers crunching on gravel. She scrambled onto a swing and pumped her legs, shouting, "Mommy, higher, push me higher." Her hair streamed back, her cheeks flushed with joy. I laughed and gave her the push she begged for, watching her soar. The sky was streaked with soft clouds, and the smell of damp earth filled the air. In that moment, I almost let myself believe we had outrun the darkness. But peace never held on to me for long. That evening, as I unpacked dishes in the kitchen, my phone buzzed against the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked it up, expecting a message from my new principal or a neighbor welcoming us to town. But the screen lit up with a message that turned my blood to ice. "Stop digging. We're watching." The words were plain, no name, no number I recognized, just black text, stark and suffocating. My throat tightened, my skin prickled as if unseen eyes had already fixed on me. I froze, staring at the message until the letters blurred. Slowly, I looked around the kitchen. The blinds rattled faintly with the breeze. The lamp above the sink flickered once. For a heartbeat, I swore I felt someone standing just beyond the glass, watching. My pulse thundered. I wanted to delete the message, erase the threat, but my fingers hovered uselessly over the screen. Whoever it was, they knew. They knew I hadn't let go. They knew I was still thinking about Jordan, about Mom's note, about the vault. "Mommy!" Ava's voice rang out from the living room. My heart leapt into my throat, and I rushed out, my hands trembling. She was on the floor with her crayon spread out, her paper a storm of green scribbles dotted with yellow stars. She beamed up at me, her cheeks smudged with color. "Look, I drew the forest fairies." She thrust the picture into my hands, bouncing with excitement. Her eyes sparkled as she giggled. "Let's chase them, Mommy. Let's chase the forest fairies." I forced a smile, pulling her close, kissing the crown of her head. "Maybe one day," I murmured, my voice catching on the words. Her joy anchored me, even as the message burned like a brand in my mind. That night, when Ava was asleep in her small bedroom clutching her bear, I sat alone in the half-dark. The house creaked softly, the forest outside whispering in the wind. My phone lay on the coffee table, the screen still lit with that message. I stared at it until my chest ached. Who was it? Margaret? Uncle Henry? Someone they had sent to keep me quiet? Or was it someone else entirely, hidden in the web of secrets Mom had tried so hard to protect me from? I pressed my forehead to the cool window pane, staring out at the forest. The pines swayed like dark watchmen, their shadows bending and shifting. For a moment I thought I saw movement, a figure slipping between the trees, but when I blinked, there was nothing, just the whisper of branches. Ava's laughter from the park replayed in my ears, a reminder of why I couldn't stop. I thought of Jordan, a boy who had run from the system, maybe still running, maybe lost forever. His name, his eyes, haunted me. I couldn't give up, not when the truth had already cost me so much. The text was clear. I wasn't just chasing shadows anymore. The shadows were chasing me back. I turned the phone face down, the silence pressing in, the forest whispering beyond the glass. My heart pounded, my body trembling, but my resolve was sharper than ever. Whoever was watching, whoever wanted me silent, they weren't going to stop. And neither was I. The morning had started like any other, with the sharp scent of pine drifting through the cool Portland air and Ava tugging at my sleeve, begging to go to the playground. The park was alive with laughter, sneakers pounding against pavement, swings squeaking as children soared into the crisp sky. I watched her, 5 years old now, her hazel eyes shining as she sprinted toward the slide, her stuffed bear abandoned in my bag because she'd finally declared, "He wants to rest today." Her laughter echoed as she climbed the ladder, her small frame silhouetted against the sun. For a fleeting second, I felt relief. After everything, the shadows in Seattle, the threats, the endless questions, I thought maybe here, finally, she could just be a child. But then she stopped halfway down the slide, her hand pressed against her chest. Confusion crossed her face, her joy draining in an instant. "Ava?" My voice cracked as I stood. She stumbled forward, her knees buckling, her body collapsing onto the bark chips below. I was running before I realized it, the world around me blurring into muffled noise. I dropped to my knees, gathering her in my arms. Her lips were pale, her breathing ragged, her little fists clutching at her shirt as if her heart itself hurt. "Stay with me, baby," I begged, my own chest seizing with panic. "Mommy's here, just breathe. Please breathe." Parents nearby rushed over, their voices a chaotic chorus. "Call 911! She needs help!" But all I could hear was the uneven gasp of my daughter fighting for air. The ambulance sirens wailed minutes later, shrill and merciless. I held Ava's hand as we were rushed inside, her tiny body dwarfed by the stretcher, her eyes fluttering closed. My tears fell unchecked, dampening the blanket they draped over her. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, sterile hallways, and the antiseptic smell that instantly yanked me back to Sophia's final days. Nurses swarmed us. Machines beeped. Monitors blinked red. I stood frozen as they wheeled Ava away, her fingers slipping from mine. Hours passed, though they felt like minutes stolen from me. I paced the corridor, my palms pressed against the cold white walls, my breath shallow, my stomach in knots. Every second without her felt like falling. Finally, the doctor appeared, his expression grave, his voice carrying the same weight I had heard once before. "Riley," he said gently, motioning me into a small consultation room. The walls were too white, the air too still, as if the room itself knew what was coming. He sat across from me, his hands folded. "The tests confirm it. Ava has leukemia." The words slammed into me like a freight train, stealing the breath from my lungs. My vision blurred. "No," I whispered. "No, not her. Not again." He leaned forward. "We need to act quickly. Chemo will begin immediately, but we'll need a bone marrow donor. Unfortunately, you're not a match." The room spun. Not a match. The phrase echoed, sharp and final. I gripped the table, my knuckles white. "Then what do we do?" His eyes softened with pity, but the weight in his voice only grew. "We need to search the registry. It's urgent. We don't have much time." My world cracked open, the pieces falling just as they had when Mom's hand grew cold in mine. The sterile smell, the machines, the doctor's grim tone, it was all the same nightmare repeating. They let me back into her room. She looked so small, swallowed by tubes and wires, her skin pale against the stark white sheets. I sat beside her, taking her hand. It was frail, fragile, achingly familiar. Her frail hand felt like Mom's, and in that moment I knew I was losing them both again. I brushed Ava's hair from her forehead, tears slipping down my cheeks. "I'm here, baby. Mommy's right here." Her eyes fluttered open, hazel and dimmed, but still so achingly bright. "Mommy?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes, sweetheart. Don't cry." She tried to smile, but it faltered. My heart shattered. I pressed my lips to her forehead, swallowing sobs. "I'm not going anywhere. You're going to be okay. I promise." But promises felt hollow against the steady beep of machines. The days blurred into nights. Chemo began, and with it came sickness that dimmed her spark. She lost weight, her laughter replaced by weak sighs. I sat through every session, holding her hand, whispering stories about fairies in the forest, trying to keep the light alive in her even as the drugs drained her strength. I begged the registry for a match, each day clinging to the hope of a phone call, a miracle. But the answers trickled in. No matches yet. Late at night, when Ava finally slept, I would stand by the hospital window, staring out at the city lights. I remembered Uncle Henry's threat, Mom's frantic handwriting, "Protect the secret," and Jordan, my half-brother, a runaway, a shadow in my life. Could he be the answer? The thought clawed at me, refusing to leave. The doctor's words rang in my ears. "We need a donor soon, Riley. It's urgent, urgent." I squeezed Ava's hand, my tears falling freely. "I'll find a way, baby. I swear it. I'll find someone. I'll save you." But inside, a hollow despair pressed harder than ever because I knew time was running out. The ER was pure chaos that night. Harsh fluorescent lights glaring down on rows of gurneys, monitors shrieking, voices rising in frantic tones. The smell of disinfectant and sweat hung heavy in the air, mixed with the faint metallic tang of blood. I stood outside Ava's room, staring at her tiny body tangled in wires, her breath shallow, her skin pale against the white sheets. My chest ached with helplessness, but then a hand touched my arm. "Miss Thompson?" a social worker said, her tone urgent, her eyes sharp with something I couldn't quite read. "There's someone I need you to meet." I hesitated, glancing back at Ava before following. My shoes squeaked on the polished tile as we wove through the maze of stretchers and curtain partitions. Nurses barked orders over the steady drone of machines. I could feel my pulse in my throat. We stopped at the far end of the ward. On a narrow cot sat a boy, Maybe 13, maybe older, it was hard to tell. His clothes were torn, his sneakers frayed, his hair matted from the rain. Mud streaked his jeans and his knuckles were raw, as if he'd been fighting the world with his bare hands. When he lifted his head, everything in me froze. Hazel eyes. Mom's eyes. Ava's eyes. The same color that had watched me with tenderness, that had begged me for help, now stared at me from this boy's guarded, wary face. The social worker leaned closer and whispered, "Picked up by paramedics last night. Runaway." He refused to give his name until I pressed. Finally he said, "Jordan." And then he mentioned Sophia Thompson. My mother's name. It felt like the ground shifted beneath me. My hands shook as I stepped closer, my throat so dry the words scraped coming out. "Jordan?" I whispered. "I'm Riley. I think I'm your sister." He stiffened, suspicion flashing in his eyes. His gaze darted toward the exit, toward the floor, back to me. He didn't speak, but something flickered, loneliness, raw and unguarded, before he pulled the walls back up. I didn't need him to answer. My heart already knew. Hours later, the DNA test confirmed what my bones had screamed the moment I saw him. Jordan was real. Jordan was Sophia's son, my half-brother. For the first time since Ava collapsed, I felt something like hope. If he was a match, maybe, just maybe, this nightmare could turn. Maybe Ava had a chance to live. I should have felt only relief, but relief never comes without a price in my family. That night, I sat in my car outside the hospital. Rain smeared across the windshield, the wipers struggling against the downpour. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my chest still reeling from the weight of the discovery. When my phone buzzed, I snatched it up, desperate for good news. Margaret's name lit the screen. I answered quickly, "Hello?" Her voice cut through the static like a knife. "So, you found him." The way she said it, flat, knowing, almost mocking, made my stomach drop. "You knew," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You knew he existed, all this time." She laughed, a low, bitter sound that crawled down my spine. "Of course I knew. I kept him hidden." I felt the air leave my lungs. What? You hid him?" Her tone sharpened, years of resentment dripping with every syllable. "Don't act so surprised, Riley. You think you were the only one Sophia trusted? No. But she always favored you. You got her love, her trust, her estate. And me? I got nothing. I was invisible." My grip tightened on the wheel, my pulse hammering. "So you punished me? By keeping him from me? By risking Ava's life?" "You didn't deserve it all," she snapped. "You never did. So I made sure you'd lose something too. I kept Jordan away. I made sure you wouldn't know about him when you needed him most. And now," her voice dropped into a hiss, "now your daughter pays the price." Tears stung my eyes, hot and blinding. "She's 5, Margaret, 5 years old. And you let her suffer because of your jealousy." Her voice was merciless. "Don't blame me. Blame Sophia. She created this mess. She made you the favorite, and now you finally know what it feels like to lose." The line went dead, leaving only the hollow buzz of silence. I sat frozen, the rain hammering harder against the glass, my chest heaving. The woman who had pretended to comfort me at family dinners, who had sat stone-faced at Mom's funeral, had been the one to twist the knife deeper all along. Her words cut like a blade, sharper than any wound I'd carried before. But in the middle of my grief, another image forced its way forward. Jordan's hazel eyes, haunted, guarded, but alive. Jordan was real. He was here. He was my brother. And maybe, just maybe, he could save Ava. The betrayal scorched me, but within the fire, fragile hope sparked. Could Jordan be the miracle I had been praying for? Could he be the one to turn this tide? I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, tears falling, my heart split between rage and desperate hope. Margaret had stolen so much already, but she couldn't steal this. She couldn't take away the chance that Jordan might be Ava's lifeline. Her venom echoed in my ears, but louder still was the image of Ava's frail hand in mine, her whisper begging me not to cry. I gripped the wheel tighter, fury and love surging together. One truth had shattered me, but another might still save her. The hospital room hummed with the steady rhythm of machines, the soft hiss of oxygen, and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. The walls were a pale shade of cream, meant to calm, but all they ever did was remind me of waiting. Jordan sat on the bed, hunched forward, the IV taped awkwardly against his arm. He picked at the corner of a saltine packet with fingers that were too thin, nails chewed down. His shoulders looked like they carried a weight far heavier than his age should allow. I perched on the chair beside him, clutching a crinkled paper bag. "I brought you something," I said softly, trying to coax his gaze up from the floor. He didn't move, so I opened the bag myself, pulling out a candy bar and a small bag of chips. The rustle of the packaging cut through the sterile quiet. His eyes flickered to the food, then to me, guarded. "You bribing me?" His tone was sharp, but under it was a thread of something else. Weariness, maybe fear. I smiled, even though my chest was tight. "Not bribing, just feeding my little brother. Or trying to." He blinked, staring at me for a long moment, as if weighing whether to let the words in. And then, in a voice so low I almost missed it, he said, "You're my sis, right? I'm doing this for Ava." The words cracked something in me. My throat burned as I reached for his hand. His skin was cool, hesitant, but he didn't pull away. "Yes, Jordan, I'm your sister, and you're already her hero." The days blurred into a storm of tests, white coats, and clipboards. Each morning started with blood draws. Each night ended with restless sleep on vinyl chairs. When the doctor finally came in with a half smile and the words, "He's a perfect match," my knees nearly buckled. Relief hit me so hard I had to steady myself on the counter. I'd been living in a nightmare for so long that hope felt unreal, like a cruel trick. The transplant itself was a haze of whispered prayers and clutched hands. I sat by Ava's bed, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, as Jordan lay down the hall, pale and hooked to lines, giving a piece of himself for her. Hours crawled by, and then a surgeon stepped out, mask dangling from one ear, his eyes tired but certain. "It went well." The words dissolved me. I sank into the chair, sobs breaking free, relief flooding every corner of me. For the first time in months, I let myself exhale. A week later, Ava's laughter echoed in the hospital garden. The spring air smelled of earth and daisies, a sharp contrast to the sterile corridors inside. She sat cross-legged on the grass, sketchbook open, crayons scattered around like spilled candy. Her cheeks were pink again, her curls wild, her voice bubbling with energy I hadn't heard since before she collapsed. "Draw with me," she ordered, shoving a crayon into Jordan's hand. He glanced at me, uncertain, then down at her. Slowly, stiffly, he bent over the paper. At first his lines were awkward, stick figures, crooked houses, but Ava squealed with delight. "That's me," she giggled, pointing to the messy figure with bouncing curls. "And that's Mommy. And that's you. See? You're tall." Jordan's mouth twitched into a smile, hesitant but real. He added a sun with too many rays, a lopsided tree. Ava laughed until she fell onto the grass, her crayon smearing green across the page. I sat on a nearby bench, soaking in the scene. Their hazel eyes flashed in the sunlight, two mirrors of Sophia, two pieces of my heart sitting side by side. For the first time in years, the air didn't feel heavy. Their laughter was a song, fragile but alive, weaving through the flowers and into my bones. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. The sound felt too loud, slicing through the peace. I glanced at the screen, an old family number. My stomach knotted. I silenced it quickly, shoving the phone away. Moments later, it buzzed again. Another call, another relative. Each vibration was a shadow creeping across the sunshine. But I forced myself to look away, back to the garden. Ava waved her picture in the air, colors smeared and uneven but full of joy. "Look, Mommy, we're a family!" The words hit me like a balm and a blade. My eyes stung as I smiled, nodding. "Yes, baby, we are." For a few hours the world was whole. Ava leaned against Jordan, her head on his shoulder, and he let her, pride flickering in his eyes like he didn't quite believe he belonged but wanted to. And I let myself dream of birthdays with balloons, of dinners filled with laughter instead of silence, of pictures on the wall that showed not brokenness, but belonging. But the phone wouldn't stop. The vibrations came again and again, relentless. Each one was a whisper. This won't last. They won't let it. I didn't answer. Not yet. I clung to the sunlight, to the sound of Ava's giggles, to the sight of Jordan sketching clumsy flowers just to see her smile. Their laughter felt like a miracle stitched together from ashes, but underneath it, unease gnawed, steady and sharp. The unanswered calls were seeds of something darker, waiting to bloom. Could this joy survive? Or was it only the fragile calm before the storm broke open again? I closed my eyes, listening to their laughter, and prayed the moment would stretch forever, even though deep down, I knew it couldn't. The alarm shattered the silence with a violent shriek, sharp enough to tear through the fog of sleep and drag me upright. I had been dozing in the stiff vinyl chair at Ava's bedside, but the moment that sound split the air, I was on my feet. The monitor above her head screamed with red numbers flashing erratically, each one worse than the last. The room filled instantly, nurses rushing in, their shoes squeaking against the polished linoleum, doctors barking clipped orders as metal trays clattered into place. The air turned heavy with the smell of antiseptic and fear, a sharp, choking mix that clawed at my throat. "Her fever's spiking, 104.9, a nurse shouted. "Push another line now," another voice cut through. I pressed my back against the cold wall, my palms spread flat against it as if bracing myself against collapse. My baby was convulsing beneath the sheets, curls plastered damp to her flushed forehead. Her lips, once bright with laughter, were cracked, gray. I lunged forward, desperate to grab her hand, to let her know I was there. But a nurse stopped me with firm urgency. "Please, Ms. Thompson, we need room to work." Room? How could I give them room when my child was burning alive before me? My fingernails scraped the plaster, my tears sliding hot and fast down my face. The sounds blurred together. Alarms, commands, the crash of instruments, and I was dragged backward in time to Mom's hospital room, the same shrill beeping, the same frantic scramble. The déjà vu was suffocating. Hours blurred after that. Ava's fever raged, unstoppable, her body rejecting the marrow that only days ago had felt like a miracle. I sat in the waiting room, hunched over my phone, my hands trembling as I dialed number after number, begging someone to explain, to fix this. My voice cracked until it was raw, shredded by desperation. That was when I heard it. Two nurses, their voices low, unaware I sat nearby. "They flagged the donor," one whispered. "A family complaint." My head snapped up. "What did you say?" Both froze. One stammered, eyes wide. I shouldn't have, but I was already moving. I tore through the corridor, my shoes squeaking, my breath jagged. The records office loomed ahead, its glass window glowing under fluorescent lights, the faint smell of dust and ink spilling out. I shoved the door open. The clerk looked up, startled, fumbling with a stack of files. "My daughter is dying," I rasped, slamming my palms onto the counter. And someone interfered. "I need the file. Now." The clerk tried to protest, but grief and fury made me unmovable. He hesitated, then slid a worn folder across the counter. My hands shook as I yanked it open, the pages trembling with me. Stamped across the top, complaint filed, donor flagged, risk concerns. Filed by Margaret Ellis, my aunt. The air was sucked out of the room. My knees nearly buckled. Margaret, who had pretended sympathy, who had sat beside me at the funeral, who had once told me to drop the vault or regret it. She had gone further. She had wrapped her envy in paperwork, and the hospital had listened. I gripped the folder so tightly the edges cut into my palms. The betrayal hollowed me out, left me raw. She had already hidden Jordan, had already poisoned our family with jealousy, and now she had stolen Ava's chance to live. Not fear, not caution, envy. Because I had Mom's trust, because I had her love, because Margaret wanted me to break. I staggered back to Ava's room, the file still in my grip. The alarms had quieted, but the steady beeps of the monitor were weak, spaced too far apart. Each sound was another second slipping away. Jordan stood frozen at the bedside, his fists trembling, his jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. His hazel eyes shone with tears, mirrors of my own torment. In that moment, he wasn't a runaway, or the secret Mom had hidden. He was just a boy watching his sister fade, powerless to stop it. I collapsed into the chair by Ava, seizing her hand. Her skin burned with fever, her grip weak as if her tiny bones were crumbling inside my palm. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy, glazed, but then they opened just enough to find me. For a fleeting second, recognition glowed through the fever. "Mommy." The word was no louder than a breath, but it pierced straight through me. "I'm here," I sobbed, leaning close so my tears fell onto her pillow. "I'm here, baby. Always." Her lips quivered. A faint smile tugged at them, so fragile I thought it might break apart. "I love you, Mommy." The monitor shrieked into one long, flat tone. "No!" The scream ripped from me, tearing through the sterile air as I clutched her body to mine. Doctors surged forward, their voices urgent, their hands trying to separate me, but I wouldn't let go. My world shrank to that sound, that line, that loss. I pressed my forehead against hers, whispering, begging, but she was already gone. When my arms finally gave out, I lifted my head to see Jordan. He hadn't moved. Tears streaked his dirt-smudged cheeks, his fists clenched at his sides. His hazel eyes, Mom's eyes, Ava's eyes, were wide, hollow, brimming with the same pain splitting me open. He had lost a sister in blood, and I had lost the last light tethering me to hope. Her last breath shattered me, and Margaret's betrayal burned like poison through my veins. The room dimmed into a blur of sterile walls, muffled voices, and the endless flat lines still echoing in my head. But through the haze, one thought crystallized, sharp and merciless. Margaret had done this, and I would not let her walk away from it. The adoption office smelled faintly of old paper and ink, the kind of scent that clung to places where lives were reshaped. My hand trembled slightly as I signed the last line, the pen scratching across the page louder than it should have been in the hushed room. Across from me, Jordan sat stiff in the chair, his hoodie pulled low, his eyes darting between the desk and the floor. But when the clerk stamped the document with a firm thud, he glanced up, his lips tugging into the faintest, shyest smile I'd ever seen on him. "Congratulations," the clerk said warmly, sliding the papers into a neat folder. "It's official." I turned toward Jordan. "You hear that?" My voice cracked, but I tried to smile. "You're stuck with me now." For a second he didn't answer, just pulled at the frayed edge of his sleeve. Then he muttered, almost too soft to hear, "You're my family now, sis." The word sank into me like a lifeline. My chest tightened, tears pressing hot at the corners of my eyes. After everything, the secrets, the betrayals, the loss of Ava, this one sentence felt like a promise that the ashes could still give way to something alive. At home in Portland, I taped the adoption papers to the fridge, right beneath Ava's crayon drawing of us, stick figures holding hands under a sun with crooked rays. Her little voice echoed in memory, "We're a family." Now, in some broken, mended way, we were. Our house had changed. The wooden floors creaked the same. The scent of pine drifted in from the forest, but the walls were alive now with Ava's art. Her sketches and splashes of color lined every hallway, each page taped like a prayer, a reminder of her laughter. Jordan lingered in front of them often, his hazel eyes so like hers, tracing every line. He never said much, but once I caught him whispering, "She drew me in." And she had. Even before she knew him, she had. But the past had claws, and it didn't let go easily. In one of Mom's old boxes, beneath brittle letters and faded receipts, I found it. A small black device, no bigger than a matchbox, hidden under fabric. When I lifted it, dust puffed into the air and my stomach dropped. A hidden camera. For a long moment I just stared, my hand frozen midair, my heart pounding. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't my imagination. Someone had been watching. I turned it over in my palm, and there, scratched faintly into the plastic, were initials, Emmy Margaret Ellis, my aunt. The realization hollowed me out. It was her all along. The threats, the shadows I felt in Portland, the way I could never shake the sense of eyes on me. It was her. She hadn't just sabotaged Ava's transplant. She had planted eyes inside my mother's legacy to spy on me, to make sure I never uncovered the truth she worked so hard to bury. The betrayal burned again, but I closed the box carefully instead of smashing it. I refused to give her more of me. The scars would always whisper, but I would not let them scream. One misty afternoon, Jordan and I walked to the Memorial Park in Seattle, the same place where Mom had once brought me when I was little. The fog wrapped the trees and benches in a heavy silence, muffling the world. The air smelled damp, earthy, and cool. I placed my hand on the plaque engraved with Sophia's name, the cold metal chilling my skin. Jordan stood beside me, his hood pulled up, his breath misting in the air. He stared at the plaque for a long time, his jaw tight, his fists shoved deep in his pockets. "She left us both," he said finally, his voice low. "Didn't she?" I swallowed hard, the fog blurring my vision. She didn't want to, but secrets took her from us. And they almost took everything else, too. Jordan hesitated. Then his hand brushed mine. Tentative, almost accidental. But I didn't pull away, and neither did he. His fingers curled around mine, warm and steady, and in that moment, the touch felt like a vow. Jordan's hand felt like a promise kept, but the scars still whispered. We stood together, two orphans of the same mother, bound not by her silence but by our choice to break it. Around us the mist clung like memory, but inside me, something lifted, a flicker of hope. Back in Portland that evening, I tucked one of Ava's last drawings onto Jordan's wall. She had drawn herself between us, stick figures holding hands beneath a crooked sun. Jordan stared at it for a long time, then turned to me. His voice was rough but steady. "She really knew, didn't she, even before I was here?" "She did," I whispered, my throat tight. "And she'd want us to carry her light." He nodded, lying back on his bed, his eyes drifting toward the paper taped above him. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw peace soften the edges of his face. And for the first time in years, I let myself believe we might be okay. But this isn't just my story. It's ours, mine, Jordan's, Ava's, Mom's, and maybe yours too. Because betrayal leaves scars and secrets break families. But survival, rebuilding, choosing love in the ruins, that's what keeps us alive. So I'll ask you, what secrets broke your trust? What betrayals still whisper in the dark corners of your memory? Share them below. Let's bring them into the light, where they can't hurt us anymore. And if my story has touched you, if you've seen yourself in these words, hit like, subscribe, and join me here. Because the only way to heal from the lies others buried is to speak the truth out loud. Family isn't just blood. It's chosen. It's fought for. It's what we build in the wake of everything meant to destroy us. And though betrayal tried to break me, it gave me something unshakable. A brother who calls me sis.